Uh, Good evening, panelists, participants, dignitaries, and office bearers. I am Professor Amdekar, senior researcher with Forum for Integrated National Security. Um, Welcome you to this webinar on the topic of resilience of global supply chain and security concerns. The broad outline of today's webinar is somewhat like this. Um, there will be a welcome address and uh, some words on the working and contribution of FINS from General Secretary Advocate Desai, post which I will put forward the thought process of FINS as a think tank on this topic. Then the first speaker will be Shriyut Kedar Deshpande. Second would be Shriyut Atul Bhopeji. Third would be Sri Ajay Lele, Dr. Ajay Lele, followed by question answers, which, depending upon the availability of time, I would moderate and address it. And the questions which, because of paucity of time, if we are not or the panel is not able to answer, we will put forward to the panelists, get their views, put it down, pen it down, and send it across to all the participants. We intend to make some brief report out of the churning and the thought process, and then see how we can take it forward to its logical destination. So in the process now, I would request Advocate Desaiji, General Secretary FINS, to welcome the participants and panelists and elaborate on FINS work and its contribution. Over to you, Desai sir.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Advocate Bal Desai. I'm General Secretary General of Forum for Integrated National Security. This is an NGO registered under the Societies Registration Act and also the Trust Act in Mumbai. We are working as a think tank since 2003, basically think tank in the field of strategic security. We have identified about 14 verticals related to the national security, and out of which about 3 or 4 verticals we are working, doing research, engaging interns, preparing reports, submitting to the concerned authorities and agencies, and with the help of experts, we run this think tank and try to make policy influencing also. Over a period of time, we have conducted many seminars, thinkers meets on various topics, and we found that the experts in the field do cooperate and give their intake, with the help of which we are in a position to prepare many reports and submit it to the concerned authorities. Today's topic is also very interesting, and I welcome the panelists as well as the participants in this webinar today. Thank you, everybody, and I hand it over to Professor Amdekar for further proceedings.
Thank you, sir. While we were deciding the calendar for events and the area of supply chain came forward, the discussion internally amongst ourselves was probably for decades together. Supply chain has been a niggling issue with India or a country like India, but hitherto was more considered to be an operational hazard. Supply chain was considered more to be an operational hazard. But if we look at more closely, events which are taking place in last few years, and especially which have been further aggravated due to pandemic and allied issues, we believe at FINS that supply chain is no more only an issue of operations or efficiency management, but it has started entering into a difficult field of security concerns for a particular state or a country. So from this perspective, increasing consensus amongst global community that there is bound to be more consistency in global uncertainties. The billion dollar question is what those uncertainties would be. Probably all are grappling to answer these what would be the uncertainties. And this is where probably risk mapping, risk mitigation questions become more important. Till very recently, supply chain issues were thought to be incurable perils, especially with small and medium sized players. Probably bigger organizations could deal with supply chain issues more by outsourcing the product development, raw material supply, and to a good extent, use of technology. However, the topics of probable World War III, pandemic, modern warfare, grand strategy, hegemonic power, climate change were more thought to be the topics for seminars, conferences, and at times coffee table topics. Now that these fears have become more a reality of life, it has added security concern angle to the complex dimensions of supply chain issues. With threatening postures by certain countries towards weaponizing of trade imbalance, more outsourcing and overdependence on few could be disastrous steps in supply chain management. Since interdependence of players across global community is inevitable, the aspect of supply chain management is not merely an operational efficiency issue, but the matter of sustainability and survival in long run. Wherever economic crisis reaches to the kitchen of a common man, scholars term this as spiraling inflation. And if those economic crises like inflation, unemployment, wealth disparity continues, then it results into civil unrest, in the bracket Sri Lanka, leading to political crisis resulting into security concerns. So, how different stakeholders including industries, multilateral organizations, regulators, have to think and act in coherence will decide the building of resilience of global supply chain forces. However, the supply chain has been, especially, I know while saying so, I may be offending few players from other industry, but at that cost also, I would believe pharma and healthcare uh, is a silver lining so far as India is concerned. And automobile, I think across the world, all the players have been suffering with supply chain, logistics, sourcing issues. And by and large, all companies and all models across have waiting period ranging from 6 months up to 1 year. And quite a good part of it is something to do with supply chain. So if use of technology, innovation, strategic thinking, underpinning geopolitical cross currents are looked upon as possible solutions, we could have scholars in the form of these three panelists, and which we thought that if it is spread across the most difficult industry because of supply chain issues, the automobile, some silver lining with pharma and security concerns resulting thereof. So we have chosen three experts to deliberate on these dimensions of global supply chain and security concerns. With this thought process at our end, we thought let us get some experts' view or critical thinking on these issues. And in this regard, I would first call upon our panelist, Mr. Kedar Deshpande. Now, Kedar Deshpande is having a rich legacy from a family background who is into social work, who is into education, media, and with that, having prestigious academic background from Engineering College of Aurangabad, Government Engineering College, masters from in medical engineering from BITS Pilani. Given this long heritage of academics, he has turned into an entrepreneur. He has been running a business, CEO, a managing director of Uma Sons Auto, and who caters to supplying certain products for prestigious clientele like BMW, Bajaj, Ducati, to name a few. Uh, so, and a person who is also a director on incubation center. No wonder I was told that Aurangabad is a place which produces more number of first generation entrepreneurs. No wonder persons like Kedar Deshpande contribute a lot in this. So we have the pleasure of hearing his views on the issues of supply chain, maybe across and especially with respect to auto industry. I request Kedarji to take forward the podium, and the dais is all yours. Virtual platform is all yours. Kedar, please.
Uh, Thank you very much, Mr. Amdekar, Professor Amdekar, who has given a lot of information about me. Thank you for introducing me. Thank you, Fins India, for inviting me for uh, such a critical area which really needs to be taken upon. And I thank you also to Dr. Nitin Kulkarni, who has introduced me to Fins India. Uh, till then, I was not knowing what was going on with Fins India. Now I got some information about Fins India. Uh, Taking this subject forward, supply chain is when it comes to automobile industry, supply chain is a very inherent word or phrase in this industry. Um, we are basically into. I will give you a quick background because I represent SME sector, and we are into auto component manufacturing for almost now 2 decades, supplying domestically as well as exporting to Europe. We also source material from India as well as indirect indirectly from outside of India. So recently, due to pandemic, there has been a lot of disruptions in supply chain. Everyone was talking about, everyone was actually feeling about, and everyone was experiencing about directly. In automobile, the discussion comes up very fast. Overall industry faced a lot of disruptions in basically due to electronic chips which were not available. It was basically disrupted, and we were sourcing it from most of the electronic chips from Taiwan, from China, from uh, some from Indonesia and Malaysia. So the automobile industry more or less is depending completely on electronic chip. And in due course, what happened is even in two-wheeler and three-wheeler, the technology has played a major role. And like four-wheelers, these two-wheelers and three-wheelers also got a lot of chips in those vehicles. So one of the when I was discussing with one of the OEMs, so OEM person was telling me that they use almost 8,500 semiconductors in one car. Of course, that was a luxury car he was talking about. But so that kind of electronics is required in particularly automobile, which normally we don't see it. We only see the material part of it, which is seen by our eyes. Of course, while we talk about a lot of disruptions, I would like to also say that This situation was an opportunity for few businesses. So, I would like to give some example. Like supplier in Ukraine was not able to supply parts to European customer, our European client. So, due to this situation, Indian supplier got an opportunity to develop those parts, and they were ready from facility point of view and capability point of view, so they could easily replace the supplier in Ukraine. So such kind of situations happen. I just want to give you some examples so that you people can get feel of it or the depth of the situation. Of course, you might be knowing that steel industry of India actually did very good business during pandemic. They were completely exporting everything. However, that impact has been on domestic market, considering the exports value, they were getting good value for their products. They were also expecting same similar level of value from domestic industry. So, of course, due to pandemic, this situation, the steel industry has definitely played a good role, and they got good opportunities throughout the world, and those ties are now quite good ties for Indian industry. So there are positive also in considering the situations. Automobile sector normally uses strategies, particular strategies for supply chain. I will quickly give you some idea about like inventory and capacity buffers. They have to keep lesser inventories and capacity buffers to be calculated. Then manufacturing network diversification is there. So what happens is that OEMs prefer to have at various locations. So that is one of the way to de-risk. And let's say there are 3, 4 plants across the India, and if some local issue is there in particular area, the complete production can be shifted to the other area. Then multi-sourcing is another way of de-risking the things. Like typically in auto industry, two suppliers for one part are being considered. Then suppliers near plants are to be considered. Then standardization of components. So why I'm telling all these things are these are the points which can be taken up while discussing the resilience of the supply chain overall. Uh, of course, it has also have different levels and stages. So supply chain, you can start it from the natural resource like steel and aluminum ore to the finished goods or finished product considered as motorcycle or cars. So whatever is produced or whatever product is being produced by a man on the earth, these normally are connected if we drill down to natural resources. So we need to consider those things. So one has to study in detail at which level we need to become self-reliant. Ideally, of course, at all levels, we need to become self-reliant on all these issues. Of course, before pandemic, there has been import of lot of stuff without so much of deliberation. Like, for example, I know that many people were buying furniture from outside, bringing containers as a furniture to India. But I feel that the products which can be produced in India should not be easily imported from uh, outside India. So I think pandemic, before pandemic, it was the situation, but after pandemic, what happened that people thought or started thinking that whatever is necessary should be procured from India and then find out the solution in-house or rather in India. Of course, automotive industry faced a lot of challenges in sourcing special materials which are not produced in India. Electronic chip, I have already said. Then logistics issues due to high shipping cost we have to face uh, because of unavailability of the ships on the sea and unavailability of container, which has made a lot of difficulties for the automobile industry, and still it is being going on. So it is not yet completely resolved. On the other hand, I would say that India has a huge market, and we can really become self-reliant to great extent. I won't say that 100% we can be self-reliant, but to great extent. Dependence can be reduced substantially. Normally, what happens is our tendency is to look for cheaper and discounted the products. So in that race, what we try to do is we try to import, like from, for example, from China, we buy anything, like even Ganesha idol, we buy it from China. So I think such things, if we can really, every citizen can think of saying that, okay, we should deny the cheaper products to be bought from outside, and then just try to focus on our internal productivities. Uh, of course, such things require a lot of initial investment in technologies. It makes difficult to offer competitive prices for the Indian industry uh, and sustain in initial days, but subsequently that can be considered as a what I can say a competitive approach. So what I feel is there are a lot of issues while importing, and to make it more sustainable model uh, from automobile or auto industry perspective. I would like to say that there are three areas to focus on, particularly in automobile industry. First one would be material, uh, like uh, it's like a raw material, like typical type of steel, typical type of plastics, or typical type of rubber which is being used for automobile industry. So many of such products are not yet produced in India, but what our approach has been is like find out alternative materials which are available in India, and equivalent solutions based on chemical and mechanical properties can be offered to the client outside India, or maybe in-house also. So if we really focus engineering way to find out alternative materials, we can definitely become self sustainable on that area. Of course, functional and aesthetic are to be considered. Nothing is to be compromised. Then, in particularly in materials, basic research in materials need a lot of patience and investments. I feel this is not practically possible for all private organizations to put in that much of money, but through government participation, such initiatives are possible. So, material is the main area where we have to focus. Uh, like recently, we have been discussing about EV, and we there is a buzzword electric vehicle, and people talk about making electric vehicles in India. But there are two major points, that permanent magnet and basically lithium material, which needs to be imported from India. In earlier days, uh, like motor was completely imported, then the battery was completely imported. But now, if we go into different levels, we what suppliers have been able to achieve, that they are able to process uh, the permanent magnet to make the motor, or to from lithium to make cells, or maybe batteries from that. So such type of continuous improvement or continuous alternative arrangement needs to be focused, considering the material part of it. The second part comes out like technology or processes. So developing again alternative processes to achieve a desired product, which is possible. Uh, adopting technologies by doing necessary investments in India. That is another thing. PLI scheme, which has been initiated by Government of India, has been a great thought process ahead, because that will make us lot of self-reliant, particularly in electronic chips, because a lot of companies are now investing in it. But to get the result of that, we may have to wait for another 4 to 5 years or more than that, because those chips are not easily available or easily manufacturable. So such kind of investments now we have been started, but a lot of things needs to be done. There is no doubt. If we do on technology front, and if we do on process front, then it is practically possible to make it self-reliant. Of course, from that perspective, considering the competitiveness of manufacturing in India, we can export those back to the world. Simple automations in agriculture also can make definitely advantage. Then you might have observed a lot of innovations happened during pandemic, that oxygen aggregators, lot of people were making of mask, which was not even produced in India, but people started focusing on it and started. So ते म्हणतात ना की प्रॉब्लेम ही प्रॉब्लेम आला की ऍक्च्युली आपण सोल्युशन शोधायला लागतो, पण आपण जर प्रोएक्टिव्हली फोकस केला तर आय थिंक वी शुड बी एबल टू gain good mileage overall. And of course, the third area or the segment which needs to be focused is like logistics and shipping. Import dependence to be reduced by investing in actually above two, so we can practically reduce the import dependence, and the logistics and shipping cost can be definitely covered. Of course, this is a very short-term period, because of course there will be definitely a meltdown of prices in logistics and shipping in another next year. Thank you. This is from my side. I hope it is in line with whatever was the subject which we wanted to discuss about. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kedar Deshpande ji. We will have separate Q&A, but however, I'm still tempted to ask
Yeah.
a quick question.
Yes.
I have noted that you also is associated with Marathwada Industries Association, and as an apex body of Industries Association,
Yeah.
what role do you foresee as one of the stakeholder in import substitution, material sourcing, vendor empanelment, technologization, and reducing vagaries on logistics and shipping. So, as an industry, you wear another hat. You being an office bearer there, what steps have you been taking to ease the burden on along with government? You are appreciated about government scheme of PLI with respect to microchips. So, as an industry player, apex industry organization, what contribution or thought processes you have been doing?
Uh, CMI is one of the very charged industry association in our area. What we have been doing at CMI is basically come together, find out the problems or situations which can be resolved not by a person or one industry or two industries, but what happens is if we come together and then we raise such issues or raise such points, we get a lot of responses from the government bodies, so that becomes very easy. So we have what we have been doing is we have been making a lot of programs, particularly on exports related. So also then we also have created Marathwada Auto Cluster, which is having a lot of machines over there, which SMEs cannot buy. So we can become more self-reliant for our industrial area. So if anyone wants to make a big laser cutting of the product, then probably the laser cut is available in the segment. So coming together definitely helps the industry to develop that area. Then we can also take up like through CMI, we have discussed and suggested to various levels of the government, and we could get actually the dry port it at near Aurangabad. So that is between Jalna and Aurangabad. So what we can do is we can just transfer our containers over there so that export can be easily done. So such kind of activities we can take up. Of course, along during pandemic, we have done a lot of activities with government bodies. So there are many things this can be discussed. So uh, I
Uh,
hope I hope I have
yes,
given
point
you
well taken,
few
Kedar.
inputs. Yeah, yeah,
In fact, another short question.
yes.
Uh, Before pandemic, India was touted to be hub for auto component for
Hmm.
global sourcing.
Hmm.
Do you foresee India will continue to be the hub, or it will capitalize based on seizing of opportunities, or it will decline in its importance? A quick remark.
No, definitely we will continue to be a good partner for the world for auto component business. So engineering knowledge is being applied by a lot of engineering firms in our country, and this has been appreciated by uh, global clients. So, just giving you one example that one of our client BMW, they
Hmm.
developed one part which was never developed for their product like Mobike, but they wanted to get it developed from India and not from the Europe, even if it is the first time product they wanted to launch. So that kind of confidence they have definitely.
So great to know this, Mr. Kedar, and I think we
Yes.
are living up to the expectation of world to look at India as continue to be the hub of auto ancillary and sourcing
Abs-
thereof. A point well
Absolutely.
taken, and
Yeah.
I reserve the right of coming back to you, especially in
Sure.
question answers.
Thank you.
After having heard the issue and the problem solving from industry players and apex bodies on automobile industry, I think another industry which has been impacted, or probably we have a lot more takeaways from this industry so far as India gaining importance is concerned, is none other than pharma and healthcare. And here we have Sri Atul Bope, presently an executive director of NextGen Healthcare, director of Morcep Pharma. He is a KMP. So far as pharma industry concerned, he is truly a key managerial personnel, and he has got a unique blend. I remember a person, if he is on business side, invariably regulators would look at the business side person with suspicion, but he has got a unique blend to be on the business side as well as on regulatory compliance committee. So it would be very interesting to know from Atulji as to how he is able to do this acrobatics of being on business, meeting with the business challenges, at the same time satisfying the regulatory compliance as part of it. And since Mr. Bope has probably seen all weathers, all countries, all foods. So I look at him as all season player like Rahul Dravid in healthcare and pharma industry. So Atul Bopeji, the dais is all yours, virtual platform is all yours. We are keen to hear from you how India is coming up with the challenges and probably proving its mettle to the world at large from healthcare and pharma. Over to you, sir. You're not, sir. You're on mute, sir.
Yes, yes. Now I have unmuted myself. Thank you very much, Professor Amdekar, for these kind words. And also, I must thank the Fins management for giving me this opportunity. Uh, Please feel free to tell me if I'm going too fast or too slow. I mean, I tend to get overboard on my assignments usually.
Yeah. Okay. As all of us know that pharmaceuticals is the most regulated industry in the world of the world. Uh, Regulations comes from the fact that it is either harmful or very detrimental to the people's health if the medicines are not of standard quality. Uh, I'm not going into the regulatory aspects of the approval of a drug, but I will want to continue talking about the opportunities because of regulatory issues or the threats because of the regulatory issues. We have both these problems. Uh, I was for last 6 years. I was on the executive committee of Pharmexil. Pharmexil is a Export Promotion Council of India, one of the 30 EPCs of India, which is which is formed by Government of India and Ministry of Commerce. Pharmexil is a apex body of 3,000 pharmaceutical exporters, and I was elected member of the executive committee for last 6 years. So it has given us a good amount of perspective on. And I was on the regulatory affairs subcommittee, chairman of the regulatory affairs subcommittee. So we have helped 4,000 new product registrations to be done across the world. Uh, India exports approximately 22 to 23 billion dollars worth of pharmaceutical formulations every year, out of which 9 billion go to North America, 9 billion go to Africa, and rest of the products are going to the other countries. I have, luckily for me, or maybe because I like traveling a lot, I had been up till now to 90 over 90 countries. And see, the regulations, when I talk about the regulations, the deep study of the local regulations actually help you to find a possible solution of the problem, which may be there, which may not be there. But then, like I have not prepared a very detailed presentation or something, but I will give you some anecdotes. Like, I used to work for a company in Bombay as an export manager, but and we had a facility which was approved by South African government, a manufacturing facility. So by deep study of the local regulations, that the product when it reaches South Africa, it has to be reconstituted into a suspension by a pharmacist, and another label has to be put in. We could find out a solution to the otherwise a problem area. So what I'm saying that the the problem solving is there, and problem solving is a very much part of the supply chain management. Problem solving opens you a lot of doors. uh, if you keep on struggling with the problem, then you're not going to reach anywhere. So the product name was petricillin. It was amoxicillin suspension, and we could supply millions of bottles of petricillin to South African market, only because the deeper study was needed of the local rules and regulations. uh, Pharmaceuticals, it has got the product has got storage conditions. I mean, each and every product has to be supplied. I mean, certain products have to be supplied between 2 to 8 degrees centigrade, so cold chain compounds. Certain products has to be stored throughout their useful shelf life between 25 to 30 degrees centigrade. That is air conditioned rooms. And third is, certain products need to be discarded within 7 days after reconstitution. Reconstitution means by adding the water for injection to the product, or purified water. Now, most of the times, the disputes come between the buyer and seller because of not exactly adhering to uh, these transport conditions or storage conditions. I mean, they always keep on pointing fingers at each other, saying that the product has become brown. And the manufacturers keep on saying that our control samples are good quality, standard quality. So you must have kept it in the sunlight. Uh, this results into a loss of face for not only the company but also for the country, because they start to stand to generalize, saying that the products coming from India are not of. They keep on generalizing it, isn't it? That the products are not of standard quality. I used to also work for a Costa Rican company for 6 years as managing director. Uh, the Costa Rica is a very far off country, and they have very specific conditions for awarding the contract to the companies. First is they want absolute top quality product. They do not want any compromise. They compare the products with the best in the world. So, number two, then they want most competitive product, most competitive pricing. And number three, when they issue a tender to somebody who has won the tender, they say that, okay, it has to be delivered in the warehouse of the institution on or before 10 a.m. of 31st March 2022. So, uh, so the challenge becomes multifold, that, you have to develop a absolute standard quality product. You have to do it at a most cost effective manner. And number three, you have to ensure that the delivery happens within the stipulated period. If the delivery does not happen, they also give you a late fee charge. That, okay, the product which will be, if it is delayed by 1 to 3 days, then we will pay 3% penalty. If it is delayed by 10 to 20 days, then you will pay 5% penalty. Something like that. I'm generalizing, but so uh, everything, it all depends on Indian pharmaceutical companies' resilience. Like the correct word is resilience, to develop these products. And see, we always used to say that good enough, good enough. The word good enough is not good enough, for Costa Rica. Costa Rica requires the the product to be of absolutely standard quality, no compromises in printing, packaging, presentation, black spots, nothing, nowhere. There are a couple of other things, I mean, um, like everything depends on the how you re-engineer the whole system. Uh, the challenges currently which we are facing, the Indian companies are facing, are twofold. I was I used to be associated with a German company setting up a pharmaceutical factory project in Uganda, Africa. And last year, due to COVID, uh, from say let's say April 2021 till December 2021, no person of Indian passport was allowed to enter into that country. I mean, this was because the widespread perception that every second Indian has got COVID. And they were simply not allowing, even if with the negative test. So all the products, all the air handling units vendors, all the clean room panel vendors, all the tiles and flooring material vendors, they were all ready and sitting with the goods over here. And when the ban was somewhat lifted in November 2021, we asked them to dispatch as soon as possible, because certain specialized personnel were required to be there to install them and commission them. So these delays, the project gets delayed a lot because of such disruptions, local disruptions. Uh, there is a problem currently which we are having, a major challenge in India, is all the pharmaceutical products which are to be exported need to be registered in that country. When the product is registered, every small country is asking for a CTD dossier, and every major economy is asking for a very lengthy dossier called as ANDA, that is abbreviated new drug application. ANDA gives all the details of the product, including the raw material. Unfortunately, in India, we are not making the most of the raw materials. 92% of our APIs or active pharmaceutical ingredients are currently imported from China. And that is a major issue which we are currently facing. Because to change the vendor for API means it will require a fresh approval from the buying country. Hello?
Yeah, yeah, you're audible,
Yeah,
sir.
okay. Yeah, yeah. So changing the API source will require a separate application approval from the buying country, and that is not easy to get because most of the tests, which like stability studies or validations, need to be carried out again. So it is a 4 to 5 years process to submit an ANDA. And also the cost, the cost of an ANDA approximately works out to be $3 to $5 million. So currently it is very very difficult time which we are going through. There is some movement happening about India starting its own API park or something. Uh, like Mr. Deshpande told me that there are certain parts of the business process can be outsourced. Like he mentioned about laser cutting. Unfortunately, nothing in the pharmaceutical business can be outsourced to another company. I mean, without involving the validations and the protocols. So it makes our life very very difficult. Uh, the regulations in our country sometimes we are not getting better, they are getting worse actually. Sometimes we hear in the newspapers that some large company paid a large sum of money to the regulators to waive the bioequivalence requirement or bio study requirements. This is only the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. The actual iceberg is much deeper, and unfortunately everybody has been doing it or done it in the past, or they continue to do it with uh, fervor. We are trying to uh, now the good part about Indian pharmaceutical industry is that 92% of the products which are sold in India by multinational companies are produced by small or medium scale companies. That means that certain quality parameters of set up by the multinational companies have been completed already by the small and medium companies, and that will help us improving the overall standard of the industry. Countries, small, even small, very small countries in Africa, they are now asking for bioequivalence studies, and costing a bioequivalence study can cost between 30 to 50 lakh rupees for a product to be made, and sometimes this much money is not even made by the company by selling that product in African countries. And they are very happy to do this for US or Europe because at least they are getting the remunerative price for the product when they sell it in these countries. Yes, we need to develop our own APIs. We need to develop cost-effective APIs, and we definitely want to make sure that our APIs are incorporated in our dossiers, which we have submitted all over the world. And once they are submitted, then only we will be able to make this change. Otherwise, currently we have a situation because last 2 years nobody has been allowed to travel to China, and uh, so many times people can be cutting corners in that country also, and we sometimes are depending on their APIs for our product. We add value by buying APIs from China, but the the extensive testing which is needed, I'm not very sure whether it is currently being done by our industry. Thanks a lot. This is a little bit too big for me. And if you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them.
Thank you, Atulji. Again, a question or two quick before we really go for formal question and answers. So, if as a common man, the takeaway is the problem of India or Indian players is more that of a perception rather than competency. Is that correct?
No, there is a problem of competency and perception. But yes, we are getting over the competency issues. I mean, we are slowly but steadily reaching there. We should be deceiving ourselves if we say that we are extremely competent. We need
Hmm.
to ensure that there are gaps in competency which we should fill out right now.
Okay. Okay. The point taken, sir.
Yeah.
If I believe it right, in South India, the government is coming up or has come up with a very big time pharma cluster with a very
Yes.
integrated facility of testing, laboratories, research and development, patent.
Oh, it's frozen. Yeah.
2 minutes. Correct. Okay. 2 minutes.
Sure. Sure.
So while he comes back, I would like to ask one point. Like you said that 92% APIs are being imported. So what is the entry barrier? Is it only the competency or uh, more things?
Well, earlier we used to make 90% of our own APIs.
Oh,
Unfortunately, over last 20 years, what has happened because the cost of Indian API, if it is $20, then the cost of API is coming from uh, overseas has come to $2. So everybody finds it very easy to buy it from overseas and start convert that into tablets.
Okay.
Also, APIs have a lot of technology involved. Pharma
mm-hmm.
business is not completely that much technology involved, but API requires a lot of technology to ensure a certain amount of yield.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sorry.
Atulji, the point taken. In fact,
Yeah,
for a
thanks.
minute or so, I had lost my connectivity. So
Yeah.
sorry for that disruption. I reserve the right of coming back to you and again bothering you and get your
Sure.
expertise on relevant issues. Having
Sure.
heard about the pros and cons from major industries, including automobile and pharma, sir, if I recall it right, last week there was an official gathering in US and players across the world came together to look at supply chain issues or niggling issues. And apparent official publication says that the consensus or concern areas have been two: technology and innovation and reducing corruption. Now, sir, if US as of now dominates in APIs, patent registration, medical technology, and China is catching up very fast, given that they themselves talk about corruption, how good and how right is this? A quick snap response.
Actually, to be very honest with you, US is the largest pharmaceutical market in the world. I mean, it is $300 billion worth of products are purchased every year by American consumers, and because of the size, it becomes attractive for everybody. Uh,
Okay.
uh, I mean, and when a company, unfortunately, Indian companies are very famous for you know cutting down the prices. Uh,
Hmm.
just to give an example in 1 minute only,
Yeah.
like ciprofloxacin is a drug which is used for, and it's a drug, broad spectrum antibiotic drug. Uh, when Indian companies were filing ANDAs for this product, the retail price for this product in US was $10 per tablet. When all Indian companies ANDA, all Indian companies ANDAs were approved on one day they approved 20 ANDAs. The price came down from $10 to 10 cents per tablet. So 99% price erosion in one day. See, American companies don't like us because we are making that sort of a competition for them. If they are selling at $1, we are aiming to sell it 1 cent.
It doesn't suit the taste.
Yeah.
Okay. Just,
Yeah.
sir, बोला. Yeah, yeah. Uh, Sir, our third speaker is joining back because of the network issues. So that
Yeah.
gives me some more time to trouble you with
Yes.
some more questions. Um,
Mm.
Sir, if APIs, as you have been saying, to a good extent or larger extent, dependent on China to procure, and to
Yes.
register a new API supplier is a long drawn and a costly process.
Mm.
But
Mm.
somewhere beginning has to be made. Can
Yes.
to some extent this industry offset this issue in the vaccine segment of pharma and healthcare?
Vaccine, we are number one vaccine manufacturers in the world. Uh, so we are actually very competitive in making vaccines. Yeah.
Yeah.
But value addition is not there in vaccines. Industry requires value added products. Like we produce for $2 and sell for 20. This is what the industry wants. Uh, Plus, vaccines has got a long gestation period, and vaccines have a high amount of technology involved. So, if you see, there are vaccine manufacturers in the country. There you can count them on the palm of one
Fingertip.
hand. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm.
Okay, good to know. I can
Mm. Yeah.
see our third speaker, Sri Ajay Lele, is back, and I hope we are audible to you, sir.
Yes, you're audible. You are
Good.
able to hear me?
Yes, yes, very much. Having understood the nuances of some of the industries, now the consensus is if technology innovation is going to be one of the savers for overcoming supply chain issues and probably mitigating the security concerns. We could not have any better person than Dr. Ajay Lele, who is having had a brief stint with Defense Forces, so as to pursue his academic zest, secured doctorate in international relations from JNU. He has got a unique blend again, being meticulousness from defense personnel, scientific thought process, being a physics postgraduate, and no wonder, a grip on international relationship, having a doctorate, astute understanding of weapons of mass destruction, and has published over 9 books. And thereby, I think after coming out from defense forces, he has proven efficiently that pen can be mightier than sword. We are keen to hear the thought process on the given topic. So it is over to you, Dr. Ajay. It's all yours. The podium, virtual podium is yours, sir.
Can you people hear me?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yeah, there is some problem of slide sharing. Can you see the slides?
We can't.
Okay, I'll just try again. Just give me 30 seconds.
Yeah. For the benefit of participants, Dr. Ajay Lele is consultant with Manor Parikar Institute of
Can you
Defense
see the
Analysis.
slides now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We can.
Okay, great. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, please, sir.
Thank you so much, Professor, and let me thank Fins for inviting me for such a interesting meeting. We had two wonderful presentations. Actually, the people on ground who are dealing things by their own experiences. They have shared a lot amount of insights. Uh, I'm going to take a slightly different point of view over here. It is more of a what one can say theoretical presentation, because I'm trying to look at the defense industry per se, and subsequently what could be the aspects related with security. So just let me start by quoting a example. The news which came in Wall Street Journal more than a decade back. The car manufacturing giants like Ford Motor, BMW, Toyota, and all that were facing problems due to non-availability of a material called Zircon. Actually, this was required for them in metallic paints. It so happened that you had a tsunami in Japan, and they had only one supplier who was giving all those sorts of materials which are required for manufacturing of their metallic paints, so on and so forth. So it is a Fukushima disaster which ended up uh, cutting a lot amount of the losses for major car giants, because the type of orders which they had already taken, they were not able to fulfill because of lack of this material. So one can understand that even if you are dependent on a single industry in some other part of the world, how much amount of a suffering one goes through. So broadly speaking, supply chain is a network of all individuals, organizations, resources, activities, so on and so forth. I'll not get into details of it, we all understand. But the main point over here is that it almost encompasses everything from the delivery to source material to the supplier to the manufacturer. So if there is a gap in anywhere into all these sectors, then there is going to be an issue. I thought as a defense officer, let me start with something which is slightly interested to all defense people. They say that the first example of a production of a truly global supply chain network was most likely the liquor called rum. The supply chain in this case was very different. You had slaves who were moved from Africa to Caribbeans to grow sugarcane. Now that sugarcane had come from India, and the actual product, the deliverable, the rum bottles, were going to the distilleries into the US. So one can understand that how supply chain, even in say hundreds of years back, was there into the picture. Uh, it's pertinent to quote over here that disorder and order lies in the logistics. From military parlance, there has been much talk on the logistics and what supply chains is all about. So let's just have a brief look at, in a defense sector, how supply chain management and security governs. Until 1950s, one can say that in a military atmosphere, you generally talked of logistics, you talked of procurements, maintenance, so on and so forth. The standard name or the nomenclature supply chain came somewhere during 1980s onwards, and then people understood that it's slightly beyond logistics. So supply chain is not only about logistics, there are a lot of other issues which are associated with it. Particularly in the military context, there has been a lot amount of challenges because of the different types of weaponaries which you import or export. It so happens that tomorrow, I'm just quoting a hypothetical case, you import something from Russia, you are using that particular type of equipment for a couple of years. There is something which goes wrong with that equipment, and you go back to Russia, and Russia says that we have stopped production of that equipment. So we don't have spares, we don't have any other things which are available. Similarly, it so happened that within the country also there was lack of doing new designs. So what happens is that, suppose today I'm talking of, say, in a generation in the context of, say, iPhones, that if I got an iPhone 2, iPhone 3 or iPhone 4, it has got no meaning today, because you don't have, if something goes wrong, to repair those things. So that's the way it has happened into the militaries also. But militaries had a interesting proposal which was there, and it is still being used. That is a reverse logistics. Nothing which goes wrong into military is generally thrown. There are, particularly in Indian context, I can say that there are a lot of amount of what we call jugaad processes which are carried out, and we still try to recycle the things and try to reuse them at least to a certain extent. So defense supply chain in that context is slightly different than the conventional supply chain as far as your commercial or a civilian domain market is concerned. If you go back to the history, one can say that during the Great Wars, that is the First and Second World War, or even during Cold War period, your essential investment into R&D was in the arena of a defense. So your internet, your GPS, your computers, all are byproducts of the research which was done into the defense. So since the research and development was done into the defense, there were not major problems as far as supply chain was concerned, because they knew from where to procure what and how to go ahead. So the link was properly established because from research and development till the finished product, it was only defense agencies which were involved into it. But today the things have become different. There are a lot of commercial agencies who are making investments into defense products. So you have that sort of a problem that if a commercial industry goes slightly down in their approach or they stop producing something, then again there is a major problem. So the type of problems with supply chain which was there during the Cold War period are far different than what we face today. So military logistics, I was making a mention, is actually the key concern as far as supply chain in armed forces are concerned. The subtle difference between the efficiency aspect, the subtle difference between the productivity aspect, and subtle difference between what is the end user actually wanting. As far as private industry is concerned, commercial industries are concerned, you are looking at profits. But as far as the public sectors is concerned, as far as armed forces are concerned, they are looking at an end product. So again, there is a subtle change over here in the thinking of achieving the ultimate result. So when you're talking of a supply chain in the context of a militaries and in the context of a commercial market, there are certain differences into it. That's why they always say that as far as first mile is concerned, everything is fine with defense and a civilian industry. But when you're going to the last mile, maybe the war has started, a lot amount of damages have happened, so on and so forth. So there are going to be issues. What are the drivers of change for supply chain in the defense industry? Particularly in the defense industry, the key industries you all know that like Lockheed Martins or Boeings and all that. So aerospace industry is one of the biggest industry in the defense architecture. Now this aerospace industry is also dealing with the civilian things also. So you have got Airbuses, you have got Boeings, all these aircrafts which are used for the commercial things are part and parcel of the chain of that particular industry. But at the same time, they are developing certain amount of a fighter aircraft, certain amount of a transport, military grade aircrafts and all that. So there at times appears to be certain amount of a confusion because your key source is the same, but your output goes into a different fashion. Major agencies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing had faced these difficulties couple of years back, but now they have understood how to manage the things. Then now we are in an era where there is a change in the nature of a conflict also. You see, before Ukraine war, everybody said that oh, wars are going to be very small, 10-15 days mein khatam ho jayega. But that's not the case now. So from conventional thinking to a asymmetric thinking to a new thinking where you're looking at a warfare from a different perspective, definitely there is going to be a change into your thinking of supply chain management also. New technologies are impacting warfare. This is a very interesting thing which one has to identify, because what happens is that the moment new technologies are coming, the nature of a warfare is changing. And the moment nature of a warfare changes, there are going to be issues in supply chain management. So as far as 21st century is concerned, the challenges in supply chain are because of various issues. In recent times, if one has to say that 9/11 actually told all of us what could be the issues related with supply chain, followed by Asian tsunami. I already quoted incidents because of what happened in Japan because of a tsunami. Then you had financial crisis, endless wars which happened in Afghanistan and Iraq. There have been a lot amount of extreme weather events also which one has to take care of. Brexit has changed a lot amount of a thinking, a lot amount of industrial activities, particularly into the European sector. Global cyber attack has been a very important element as far as disruptions into supply chains are concerned. COVID-19 and the ongoing war in Ukraine, you all know pretty well about it. So ensuring supply chain security means what? First and foremost aspect, one has to understand that when you're talking of a security, there is nothing called civilian and defense. A security is for a country. The defense industry needs to be secured, so as your private industry also needs to be secured, because that's the basic job of a government and that's the basic job of our armed forces. So when one is talking of ensuring supply chain security, it is a holistic concept. It's not only into the branches of a defense per se. If supply chains are compromised, then what's going to happen? Definitely your industrial basis will be faltering. So by and large, even if your civilian supply chains are getting compromised, there is going to be a challenge as far as security is concerned. What happens in defense industry is definitely slightly a different game because your investments, your outputs, your requirements are far different. than the requirements of the civilian industry. And again, as far as defense industry is concerned, the requirements are different during peacetime and during wartime. Foreign dependency, as it was already been mentioned, is basically a main risk to supply chain. It is known that China exports around 75% of world's personal laptop computers and two-thirds of the cell phones. China is famous for counterfeit electronic parts, and they have got a very bad track record. But there are companies in the world who actually, because of the cost factor, purchase all those things from China. More importantly, particularly from a defense industry point of view, strategic minerals, strategic materials are a huge issue. Today, when one is looking at from where we get all those things, uh, Democratic Republic of Congo and few other countries are supposed to be the main suppliers. We just had heard what are the issues with lithium and all that. So these are the main issues which one has to look at. Particularly your rare earth elements and rare earth metals, China has having almost 95% of the stuff in their own geographical area. So you have got no option but to depend on China, at least for these things. People are trying to see the alternatives. Like it was mentioned that you need to have alternatives for existing minerals and materials also. And that will be the key for the future. If you find alternatives and your dependence subsequently will definitely reduce. As far as military industrial complex is concerned, particularly our part of the world, there has been huge dependence on Russia and Ukraine. And you all understand that if a war breaks out over here, there is going to be a problem as far as supply chains are concerned. Logistics is the key as far as armed forces are concerned. I will not dwell much on it, but one must understand that battle strategy and logistics are two sides of the same coin. So one has to really look at those things with a lot amount of a concern. Many bold strategies have failed because of supply chain. Like you can see what happens in Ukraine. Every day you hear the president of Ukraine is saying that I'm not getting enough amount of arms and ammunition to continue with the war. So definitely somewhere down the line, one can really correlate this with a failure of a supply chain. What we need to remember is that there are many similarities amongst commercial chains and military supply chains. However, it is important to know that the main difference is about what? It is about the ultimate goal. As far as commercial supply chains are concerned, the main purpose is to earn profits. As far as armed forces are concerned, there is something more than the profit associated with it. What could be the critical vulnerabilities as far as supply chains are concerned from a military architecture point of view? You have got kinetic capabilities, you have got missile systems, hypersonic weapons, work is on, directed energy weapons, again the work is on, energy storage and batteries. These are supposed to be the very key components as far as any defense architecture is concerned, and that is where there is a good amount of a dependence on outside agencies. As far as metals, minerals, I have already made a mention to it. Microelectronics again is a very important area. We just had heard about chips, how many chips are being produced in India and other countries and all that. There are a lot of countries who are depending on countries like South Korea and all that. So there are a lot amount of concerns into the minds of the people that tomorrow, God forbid, when something goes wrong into the Korean theater because of the, you know how sort of a North Korean administration is working on, then there will be a major amount of issue as far as supply chain is concerned into the arena of chips. What are the strategic enablers over here? I think one has to concentrate on workforce. If you remember, immediately after the disintegration of USSR, Americans made a very smart move, and all those unemployed scientists from Russians were picked up by them. So as far as modern technology is concerned, you must understand that technology is there only because you have got a trained manpower available, and that one has to really look at it. Cyber posture, I'll come to it later, but that is again a very important element associated with it. As far as manufacturing is concerned, manufacturing is seeing a lot amount of changes because of the new technologies. Particularly your 3D printing technology, right now it is at a level where certain things are happening, like Boeing is developing their engines by using 3D printing technology. International Space Station also is printing few parts by using these technologies. So the technology is maturing fast. Your entire defense, your entire, not military, your entire industry architecture is based on CNC, computerized numerical controlled machines, where you say that if you give an order of 100, then I can produce it. If you give an order of 500, I can produce it. It becomes cost effective. But the moment 3D printing comes into thing, you can even produce one part or one component or one machine. It is going to be a game changer when this technology actually matures. And at that point in time, your entire supply chain has to be reworked because of these things. What are the recommendations over here? I think I will not get into the details of all recommendations, but building domestic production capacity is a good thing, but it's not fully achievable. So one must understand that. There is a limit to becoming Atmanirbhar. So one has to actually understand that in a true sense. Engaging with partners and allies is very important. So your foreign policy plays a very important element into it. Other things are almost self-known to the other feature. Future of a defense market. Again, defense market has got certain amount of thinking which goes on based on what sort of orders which are going to come up in future. So it will all depend on the global threat matrix. So supply chain also will have to readjust itself based on the global threat matrix. COVID pandemic has impacted supply chains. We all know about it. I'll not get into the details of it. You see what has impacted before COVID also, particularly when Trump administration came into being, there was a lot amount of issues as far as US-China trade war is concerned. That has impacted supply chain market hugely. There is certain amount of statistics which is given over here about what happened in January 2020 when 3,000 firms were identified. Now what has happened is that there are certain firms who have understood that if they have to win the game of a supply chain, then they have to relocate themselves from their existing sites also. So there are few people, few industries who are trying to move closer to the coast also because of the supply chain related issues. But of course, every industry can't afford to change the infrastructure in such a short period of time. As far as Ukraine is concerned, it's still the story which is happening. So I will not make a value judgment over here, but there are issues like 50% of world's neon gas, which is required for the production of semiconductor comes from Ukraine. So definitely in the long term, there could be impact on electronic industry. There has been already impact on aviation and aerospace industry. Interestingly, if you really look at it, Russians are not dependent that much on to your Lockheed Martins and Boeings. So the business of Lockheed Martin, Boeings and other aero giants are continuing. Russians are having their own say in their own system. The major problem which is occurring right now is with the aviation fuel, and definitely your airlines industry and various other factors are going to get associated with it. ICT supply chain is a different subject on its own, and there are a lot amount of concerns all over the world as far as ICT supply chains are concerned. One has to really look into very details into it, because you see disruption is supply chain by doing physical activities is problematic, but by doing cyber activities is definitely much easier, and that's what is happening, and a lot amount of supply chain cyber attacks which are happening. What are the security threats in this context? I think third party vendor, because what happens is that people are aware of cyber threats, but they don't implement it into their day-to-day activities. And that's what many people have found, that third-party vendors and all that, they're not much bothered about data security. Then again, very interesting thing which is happening off late is that supplier or a vendor fraud. That means what happens is that somebody is connecting with you as a supplier in a supply chain or as a vendor in a supply chain, but actually that is a cyber criminal who is connecting with you. So at end of the day, everybody says that without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And as far as supply chains are concerned, you need to have a data security. Modern technologies like blockchain technologies and all that are making a lot amount of improvements as far as these systems are concerned. So as far as security is concerned, supply chain security focuses on risk management and external suppliers, vendors, logistics, transportation. So basically the link, at every link, they are trying to see that they're secured. I was making a mention, physical supply chain security is a different aspect and a cyber threats is a different aspect. Right now, most of the activities which are happening are found happening into the domain of a cyber. So supply chain management is a dynamic problem. Challenges would always be there. It's not that today, if somebody comes out with some sort of a solutions, your problems are going to get over. It's a dynamic system. It will be there. Idea is that how to minimize the challenges which are existing. First and foremost thing over here is that one size fits all type of a mentality should not be there, because every problem is a unique problem in itself, and every problem demands a different type of attention and different type of a solution. So industry also should be aware that a particular thing happening in a particular industry may not be the same type of a solution applicable to the other industry. There is possibility that there could be certain amount of commonalities, but one should not go that one size fits all with the mentality that you will be able to resolve all the problems. In the end, I will say that as far as India is concerned, India is doing okay as far as exports are concerned. We have reached a target of around $400 billion of exports in this financial year. So it gives an indication that yes, we have got strengthening of a supply chain in the country. Globally, there is a need for resilient and stable supply chain. I think one of the best suggestions which has been made by India is about development of a global standards in cybersecurity, because that's going to be the key as far as management of a supply chains are concerned. Because you see, cybersecurity at one end is actually trying to mitigate the threats which are there to the supply chain. But at the other end, one can say that because of ICT, because of your blockchain technologies, because of big data, you're able to manage the things in a very different fashion. One must understand that we are staying in the era of a industry 4.0, and one has to look at these technologies from a positive perspective also. Military industry needs to explore various options. At the end, I will say that a country is secure if supply chains are secure. Thank you so much for your patience.
It is always pleasure, Dr. Ajay, to hear you. And more I hear you, and more the knowledge we get from you, it makes us believe that what we probably try and understand is 0.1% of the whole gamut. Sir, it was all well articulated, well researched, a postdoctoral presentation. But a quick question before we go for a formal lengthy question is, quick question to you. You happen to say is there is no difference in security between a civil security and a nation security. Now, in that aspect, if we look at use of drones, okay, and if we were to see a war before this present war between an Azerbaijan and Armenia, drones were extensively used as one of the strategies or weaponry. So that was from a nation security perspective. And what common man hears about is Amazon using drones for deliveries. It is probably a civil use of drones. So, sir, when such technology and components and equipments are used both from a nation security perspective and a commercial perspective, how would you look at being more prudent and judicious from supply chain? And especially when you happen to say one of the supply chain player could pretend to be a known player, but he could be a cyber criminal. So taking all this future increasing use of drone, what would you suggest a person from supply chain to look at, or industry to look at, or a civilian to look at?
I think you have picked up on a very interesting and a very pertinent example. Azerbaijan-Armenia war had actually opened eyes for many people. Means people, of course, this is a very extreme view that people have started saying that, oh, you don't even require Air Force now, you can manage with drones also. Of course, it was a small war fought in a smaller sector. But having said that, a drone has got multiple utilities. Like we always say that almost every technology in modern day context is a dual use technology. So you just can't shy away from the advantages of certain technologies and try to say that, no, we will ban this, we will ban that. You have to do a judicious mix of it. And I think as far as India is concerned, India has taken a very proactive view over here. We had the incidents of Air Force Station Jammu getting attacked. You talk to any BSF officer or any CRPF officer, there's so many drones which are crossing from Pakistan border. There have been incidences where they have brought drugs. There have been incidences where they have dropped arms also. So one has to look at it from a counter drone technologies, how we can address these issues and all that. And DRDO is already working on counter drone technologies. There is a certain amount of success in certain areas as far as counter drone technologies are concerned. But on the civilian side, if you recollect, a couple of months back, Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia had come out with a clear-cut policy of uses of a drone in the civilian sector. We want our startup sector also to get involved into production of a drones, maintenance of a drones and all that. So I think one has to draw a line as far as technology is concerned. You just can't say that a technology is used for a military purposes, so let's ban that technology, because those technologies has got multiple other usages also. So one has to do that sort of what you can say, walking on a thin ice, But one has to do that because every technology will come with advantages as well as certain amount of disadvantages.
So, to understand, sir, do you foresee the strong governance framework will do a good while judicious use of drone as a technology between both civilian as well as war-prone areas?
You see, as far as usage of a drone as a technology in the civilian domain, already we have got some clear-cut guidelines, not only in India, in other parts of the world also. That means as far as your airports are concerned and other vital areas are concerned, how close the drones can fly, what sort of a
Right.
height the drone can fly, who should, what you can say, ensure that they are, there are certain amount of permissions which are required to do that and all that. And as far
Okay.
as armed forces are concerned, again, drone is basically both a boon and a bane. Boon because we have seen in Azerbaijan what sort of advantages a country can get if you use drone technology. Because drone technology has got tremendous amount of utility, not only in a combat as a drone, but particularly for reconnaissance purposes, for intelligence gathering purposes, there is a huge amount of utility. So one just can't shy away from the technology in a military domain that we will not use it. So you require certain amount of checks and balances. I think again, every country should have their own checks and balances based on what are their own requirements. Because countries like India are very typical countries where you are sharing borders with your adversaries, and those adversaries are not ready to fight a war with you on a battlefield, but they want to do certain amount of things. The way terrorism is there, tomorrow there will be more of a drone-based terrorism also. So one should be aware of all these challenges, but at the same time, one just can't say that we'll ban this technology because there are tremendous utility in the civilian domain.
Okay. Point well taken and noted, sir. Sir, we have a question from one of the participants and office bearer, Dr. Nitin. Yes, you can please go ahead and address a question to the speaker as the case is. Dr. Nitin, please.
Thank you, sir. It was wonderful session with all three panelists contributed immensely to this particular subject. I have one question each for each panelist, with your permission, sir.
Yeah.
The first thing is that I would like to compliment Mr. Kedar Deshpande. He mentioned that we should not buy things if even if they are cheap, and that China. From 125 years ago. The same thing was said in Indian context and from this part of the world. Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak, he said you should buy things which is made in India even if they are costly. So we should buy things with a quality product even if they are a little bit costly. And today is happened to be his birthday also. So on that note, Mr. Kedar has struck a very solid point. Now my question to him is that, considering the three C's which has disrupted the logistics and supply chain, that is COVID, conflict, and climate, what is the future of the JIT, sir? Just in time philosophy.
Uh, yeah. Mm, Particularly if you're talking about the cross border, then
Yes,
JIT
yes, yes.
JIT is something which uh, is an is a phrase for OEMs and not for the suppliers. So because suppliers will have to carry stocks at doorsteps of OEMs and then deliver them just uh, we may have to increase the stocks at doorsteps of OEMs when particularly when you talk about the cross border, but that is for a certain period and not for a longer period. In my opinion, in 1 year's time, the situation of logistics will definitely be diluted and will go back to the pre-COVID situations. So
So JIT will be still valid? The concept of JIT?
yes, yes, it will. Yes, yes, it is. Also, it was valid for many OEMs. They were not at all accepting the stocks at their end. So it is particularly for suppliers who has to take care of those situations and like feed the lines according to JIT.
Okay, okay, thank you. So the JIT is here to stay for long, even if there
Yeah,
are
yeah,
disruptions.
absolutely,
Okay, thank
absolutely.
you. Thank you. The next question is to Mr. Atul, sir. Now, as you said, multinationals and different economies. So 90%, 95% of the formulations API that we need to import from other countries, including China. So, do you think that we still lack the hard infrastructure in terms of ports? Because to clear a ship in China, it takes 5 days. India, it may take say 25 days. So, what is your opinion on this, sir?
Okay, you can hear me. You can hear me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did not say China and other countries. I only said we buy all our APIs from China. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
it is
yeah, yeah.
95% of them are bought from China. This is not because we do not have the technological capability to produce them here. We were producing all these APIs in India earlier, and because of the ease of doing business or because of our greed of the business community, we have uh, resorted to buying it from other countries. And as such, now because the APIs also are not they are not plucked from the tree. They also have to be going through a particular process. There are intermediates for API, and then the third metabolite, second metabolite. So all these products, now China is firmly entrenched into manufacturing these APIs. They make a very large quantity, and as a result, they are uh, definitely have much more cost advantage over India. Yes, some efforts are being made, like Mr. Madekar was saying that some other time ago, that pharma city is being planned in Hyderabad. Uh, you know, we are very good in planning. I don't know how good we are in actually bringing it to the ground. Plans तो बड़े बड़े होते हैं. Maharashtra also they're planning 5,000 acres of API technology park uh, somewhere in Raigad district. But I don't know what will happen. What is currently the situation of that? Uh, yes, the fact remains in these 2 years of COVID has rattled everybody, and there is a mm possibility that we will want to have our own APIs, but the whole process is a disruption process. I mean, even if you have making APIs in a cost effective manner, then you have to submit all the dossiers with all the validation studies, all the stability studies, all the bioequivalence reports once again to the regulatory authorities in 180 countries in the world. Uh, so that is the challenge right now. Nobody wants to reinvent the wheel. जो चल रहा है वो चलने दो. This is what is current attitude. Regarding the ports and all, I'm not very competent person. Yes, I agree with you that we have very hopeless infrastructure in terms of supply chain management or logistics is concerned.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So my another question is to Dr. Ajay Lele, sir, the third panelist, and it is wonderful to experience to listening to you. Now, my question has got two facets. One thing is that you mentioned about industry militia complex, which is regulatory complex rather. Now, if you just take the top 100 defense equipment manufacturing companies of the world, you'll find that there are hardly two Indian companies, HAL as well as Bharat Electronics. So, do you think that we still have to go to that last mile advanced technology in terms of engineering to leverage our position? And the second part, which is very critical, and from the academic point of view is concern, is that considering the use of electronics in automobile, as Mr. Kedar also mentioned, and you also mentioned that a lot of things are going to be done in aerospace industry, where electronics and microelectronics will be a very significant part. We find that number of enrollment to engineering colleges, in particularly to this discipline of electronics, is going down, and many colleges will down that particular department. So, do you think it's a concern down the line?
Thank you so much. I was not able to hear you very clearly, but generally I got gist of both the questions what you are trying to put across. I think as far as electronics is concerned, and you see, let's accept one fact that even if we talk of a defense industry has to come into to terms to the challenges of what you can say climate change. So as far as your energy consumption is there, your defense industry, or more than that, your defense forces are the huge consumers of the energy. So this can't go endlessly because you just can't have one rule for the other people and the other rule for the defense forces. I fully understand and appreciate that the requirements of defense forces are far too different than the other, but still you have to find a via media. And I think there something on these lines one has to think of. People have started looking at biofuels as an alternative. Your fighter aircrafts can fly on biofuels and other types of fuels also. So one has to do, I will not say that there has to be a direct jump, but one has to do a consolidated effort towards ensuring that more amount of electronic systems will come into being. If you have just read, I think maybe 1 or 2 days back only, already a prototype of a aircraft which can fly on a battery has been presented. It is an aircraft, if my memory goes correct, it can carry 19 passengers. So those types of ideas, those types of work have already started happening. And this work has to find roots into the armed forces also. So you can't say that my fighter aircraft will do a certain amount of a sorties with certain type of a fuel. So what, it will deplete your ozone layer and all that. All those arguments have got no meaning in the modern day world. So one has to go along with what is the existing trend. And this is where research and development becomes a key issue. You mentioned about two companies, HAL and Bharat. You see, the basic problem with India's defense architecture, to my mind, I may be wrong, is that we do not allow our people to export. Same thing happens into your domain of a space also. So today, if I produce something, say for ISRO, or today I produce something for DRDO, I put a huge plant, I make a huge investment, and subsequently they say, "Oh, kaam khatam ho gaya, now there are no more orders." Then what will that industrials do? So under these circumstances, you need to have a policies where you will allow your people to get into the business of exporting also. I think there is certain amount of attraction towards that, and government is already making certain amount of provisions. But I think one has to slightly walk very fast into these domains, because that then only the industry will start investing. Because for industry today, if Indian Army says that I'm not going to buy anything from you, the entire efforts, the entire infrastructure developed by the industry goes for a six. So the industry needs an alternative, and that's where I think the real challenge is going to be.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Over to you, Professor Amlekar, sir. I think we some lost connectivity. Sir, there is the question Mr. Kedar wants to ask to you. Mr. Kedar, you can.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Uh, yes, this is something related to you said some need to be developed uh, for the industry to invest. I think there has been one initiative taken by the government of India on banning about 300 items or spares for to be used in defense. So, what is your opinion about this? Because this
I
is
think this is a very good initiative because we started with 100 items and that list
yes,
is now slowly increasing. You see,
yeah,
what happens is that it's not correct to give an example of China, but let me give an example of China. You see, what
mm,
China was doing is that they are telling their defense establishments that this is what we have produced. As a first cut, you accept it. Subsequently, we
okay,
will see what are your own requirements. What is happening in India is that, as far as we are concerned, we will say that no, I only want a Rafale. I will not
mm,
compromise with Tejas. Those types of things which are happening. Of course, as far as India is concerned, you got a different set of challenges from a security perspective also.
mm,
You
mm,
just can't have a axe and fight with a demon. So those
mm,
types of things are also there. So that's what I said. You need to have a via media, and at least if you push the defense industry also saying that you can't import these types of items, you have to make them over here. Then at least certain
mm.
amount of a checks and balances will be there. Certain amount of a push will be there, and it will encourage the domestic industry also to look at it from a very positive point of view, because then they will understand that yes, now these types of items are concerned are not going to have any sort of a international competition. Forget about domestic competition. That has to be there. It's healthy. But at least there will be no amount of international competition. So tomorrow, if somebody goes and says, oh, no, no, I can buy it from Israel, those types of things are not going to be there. So I think that's a very
Mm.
welcome initiative.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Kedarji. Manojji, you had a question for Atul Bhopre, sir. He has taken permission as he has some other commitments, so he had requested to leave this platform to meet with the other commitments. So I request you, Manojji, that if you can mail your question to us, we will redirect it to Atul Bhopre, sir, get his view, and then revert back to you. Thank you so much. Sir, with Dr. Ajay and Keda's permission, if I may take 2 or 3 minutes more, I have received a question or two. With your permission, if I may ask?
Yes.
Please.
Yeah. This question is for Kedarji.
Yeah.
Uh, if 80% of international trade in volume and 70% in value is routed through sea routes, and if the Arctic ice is melting and the people are talking about opening of new sea routes because of ice melting, what impact it is likely to have on shipping, supply chain, procurement, and in turn supply chain as a whole? What impact do you foresee?
Interesting and interesting question about the logistics, but I believe that even if there are alternative routes defined because of this melting of ice, uh, I think there would not be much of a difference because the cost of logistics goes down substantially during because of pandemic. It has gone up, but otherwise the cost of logistics is not much if we take the sea route. So in before pandemic, I remember that the container used to one container shipment used to be less than $200, and now it is more than $6,000. So that kind of level it was. So I don't think there should be a big issue even if there is a melting. Of course, uh, beyond 50 years, nobody knows what will happen.
Okay, sir. One more quick question, sir, to Kedarji only. Now we have seen that after about a gap of 20 years, $1 is €1.
Mhm.
And since quite many Indian multinationals, say for example Tata Motors, especially in automobile, get car designing from Italy, raw material from some other country, probably assembling in India and exporting it to some other countries. When we have such products routing through multiple countries, and major convertible currencies are getting parity like US dollar is equal to €1, what impact do you foresee again on supply chain because of this change?
In my opinion, there has been a drastic and continuous reduction in import of the products and not products, I would say items or components which are being used in Indian markets or used in assembly of the vehicles in India. Yes, there has been lot of uh, customs taxation has been done on particularly buying direct vehicles from outside. But
Okay.
if the components are being produced here, then there should not be any problem. And as I said, alternative materials are available in India. One has to really go into the details of the properties of the material which is being suggested by the uh, OEM, and then find out whether it is available in India. And I have been doing this with while working with BMW and Ducati. And this is possible, but it takes some time, and that is it. Yeah,
So, uh, to this limited extent, Atmanirbhar Bharat is working well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. This next question is to Dr. Ajay. Um, Sir, this is regarding how do you plan for and tackle exigencies in supply chain arising due to intimidating forces in free passage of SLOC?
You see, they're very interesting because your sea lines of communication has always been a challenge. And you have got certain amount of rules, regulations which are associated with it. So as far as open seas are concerned, nobody can just block the things which are coming from other parts of the world because the battle is going to be limited between one or two countries only. Means at least the present Ukraine crisis has told us that world doesn't have an appetite for the third world war. So under those circumstances, your battle is going to be restricted. And India has got that much amount of a global traction that nobody is going to stop all those things and create problems at your sea lines of communication and not allow you to get the desired materials which is required. There will be problems on ground as far as your managements are concerned, how your ports are active at that point in time, how much amount of a turnaround time which you are offering to those things. Is your private container shipping getting affected because of your war requirements and all that? So those things one has to do at a tactical level. But broadly at a strategic level, I think India has got a good amount of a global image where I doubt that anybody will create problems as far as sea lines of communications are concerned.
Okay, good. A very positive thought process, especially for industry players. So the last question again to Ajay sir. If supply chain as a whole has internal issues within country, and especially when you do import and export, also outside the country, the destination where you either import or export. So if risk has to be mitigated in supply chain issues, how would you prefer to allocate weightages towards internal exigencies and external exigencies in supply chain?
You see, as far as your internal exigencies are there, there is good amount of a control which a government can have. As far as the external exigencies are there, yes, yeah, through a level of a multilateralism, through a level of a United Nations, through a level of doing a lot of activities. You see, as far as supply chain from armed forces perspective is concerned, the work has to start during peacetime. When the balloon goes up, and if you start saying no, we have to have these types of things and all that, then it's going to be utter chaos. So as far as internal challenges are concerned, I think government has got the wherewithal to address those challenges, because if a war breaks out, there are more powers which are available with the government as far as internal systems are concerned. As far as your external systems are concerned, during peacetime itself, you need to do a lot amount of a modeling, simulation, wargaming sort of activities, and try to find out where actually the challenges could be, and be proactive and take some sort of precautions, deal with international agencies, deal with other countries, try to resolve the issues, try to see the alternative mechanisms also. Because to depend on a individual or a individual company is not going to be beneficial during war. If something goes wrong with that company, then again you are going to be at a loss. So you need to have these types of mechanisms which are well worked out during peacetime.
So, in a way, a very flexible mechanism with game A, plan B in place in case of some unanticipated event takes place.
Definitely, you need to have, I will say, even you need to have plan C also. There's no harm in having those types of plannings at least done at a peacetime, because at wartime you will not have any sort of a time to get into all those
Oh,
things.
yes. With this, I think we are coming towards the end of our webinar. I think we have extensively discussed, and the panels drew their experiences and been very vocal about the positives and the shortcomings or the learnings, what we can take out of the issues which are arising out on supply chain management. It was, at least for this forum, a very, very knowledge gaining exercise. and which makes such interactions or webinars more fruitful. We always depend on the knowledge pool or industry pool, and we reserve our right or a request to you, sir, that as and when Fins, you have been honoring the request of Fins to come on platform, we continue to look forward to you on this. With this vote of thanks and participants, thank you so much for coming here. For your kind information, the relevant links on Fins India and the website on Facebook where the proceedings could be available. And I would seek permission from Ajay Lele sir if we can use part of your presentation to share this with participants or knowledge gaining people. With your permission, I would do so, Ajay sir.
Definitely, you can go ahead. If you
Thank-
want a presentation, I'll email it to you.
Yeah, please, sir. It will be helpful.
Definitely.
So with this, I thank one and all the participants, the panelists, and look forward for a continued support. Thank you so much. And with this, I formally declare that this webinar is over. Thank you so much.